There is a high probability, according to the World Meteorological Organization, that 2024 will be yet another record-breakingly hot year. The Weather Agency of the United Nations has issued a red alert over global warming, citing record-breaking rises in greenhouse gas emissions in the previous year, as well as rising land and sea temperatures and the melting of glaciers and sea ice. In a report published, the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, stated that there is a high probability that 2024 would be yet another record-breakingly hot year and cautioned that global efforts to buck the trend had fallen short. In its State of the Global Climate report, the Geneva-based organization expressed worry about the growing risk to a key climate goal, keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, above pre-industrial levels. Let's examine these first. Long-term changes in temperature and weather patterns are referred to as climate change. These fluctuations may be caused by significant volcanic eruptions or variations in the sun's activity. However, human activity has been the primary cause of climate change since the 1800s, mostly as a result of the combustion of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Fossil fuel combustion results in greenhouse gas emissions that envelop the Earth like a blanket, trapping solar radiation and driving up temperatures. Methane and carbon dioxide are the two primary greenhouse gases responsible for climate change. These result, for instance, from using coal to heat a building or gasoline to operate a vehicle. Carbon dioxide can also be released through land clearing and forest destruction. The two main industries that emit methane are agriculture and oil and gas operations. Among the primary industries producing greenhouse gases are energy, industry, transportation, buildings, agriculture, and land use. Scientists studying climate change have demonstrated that, for the past 200 years, almost all global warming has been caused by people. Greenhouse gases produced by human activities such as the ones listed above are warming the planet more quickly than it has warmed in the previous 2 millennia. The Earth's surface currently has an average temperature that is 1.1 degrees Celsius higher than it was during the late 1800s, before to the Industrial Revolution, and higher than it has ever been in the previous 100,000 years. The last 4 decades have all been warmer than any other decade since 1850. With the most recent decade being the warmest on record, from 2011 to 2020. Many believe that the primary effect of climate change is increased temperatures. However, the rise in temperature is just the start of the tale. Since everything on Earth is interconnected, changes in one place might have an impact on changes in all other areas since the Earth is a system. Intense droughts, water scarcity, devastating fires, rising sea levels, flooding, melting polar ice, catastrophic storms, and dwindling biodiversity are just a few of the effects of climate change that are currently being felt. Climate change may have an impact on our jobs, housing, safety, food production, and general health. Some of us, like those who reside in small island nations and other developing nations, are already more susceptible to the effects of climate change. Prolonged droughts are increasing the risk of starvation, while conditions like sea level rise and saltwater intrusion have progressed to the point that entire populations have had to evacuate. It's anticipated that more people may be relocated in the future due to weather-related incidents. Thousands of scientists and government reviewers concurred in a number of UN reports that keeping the rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius will help us escape the worst effects of climate change and maintain a habitable climate. However, present practices indicate that temperatures will climb by 3 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. All people on the planet are impacted by the emissions that cause climate change, although certain nations create far more of them than others. About half of all greenhouse gas emissions worldwide in 2020 came from the top 7 emitters: China, the US, India, the EU, Indonesia, the Russian Federation, and Brazil. All individuals and nations need to take action against climate change, but those that are primarily responsible for the issue should do so first. There are international frameworks and accords like the Paris Agreement, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Sustainable Development Goals. The reduction of emissions, adjusting to the effects of climate change, and funding necessary modifications are the three main areas of action. Migrating energy systems from fossil fuels to sustainable sources like wind and solar power will cut down on the emissions that cause global warming. However, we must move quickly. Even if more nations are pledging to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, emissions must be halved by 2030 in order to prevent global warming from exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius. In order to prevent catastrophic levels of climate change by 2050, almost two-thirds of today's proven fossil fuel reserves must be maintained in the ground. Achieving this will require significant reductions in the usage of coal, oil, and gas. By adjusting to the effects of climate change, people, infrastructure, companies, livelihoods, and natural ecosystems are safeguarded. It addresses both present effects and those that are probably coming. While adaptation will be necessary everywhere, the most vulnerable populations with the fewest resources need to be given priority in order to deal with the effects of climate change. A high rate of return is possible. For example, disaster early warning systems can save lives and property and can yield benefits up to 10 times their initial cost. Governments and corporations must make large financial investments in order to combat climate change. However, ignoring climate change comes at a far higher cost. A crucial first step would be for developed nations to honor their promise to give developing nations $100 billion a year so they may adjust and transition to greener economies.